I think this is a vile attack, and you're right, you had people mown down just for walking along a bridge, going for a coffee or going to pick up the kids from school. You had then the attempted attack on Westminster, on the Parliament itself, which failed because of the bravery of PC Keith Palmer, who gave his life saving others, and also the other security and police coming to his aid at that time. But there's obviously going to have to be the full review that the police and security staff will want to lead, and we need, I think, to let them do that and to let them establish all of the facts first before we can be clear exactly what lessons should be learned.
You're right, of course, about the sort of heroic actions of some of the people on the scene, not least, of course, Keith Palmer, who lost his life. And, of course, the police as well are very involved in preventing these kind of attacks happening in the first place. Are they properly funded to do that?
I think there is a broader debate about funding, and we in the Home Affairs Select Committee are just launching an inquiry now into policing for the future and how they are equipped, both in terms of funding and also in terms of capabilities to deal with changing crimes. That includes terrorism, that includes issues around online crimes and changes there as well. I don't think that's the immediate issue for today, because I know that parliamentary security has always been well funded, and the parliamentary staff do work in teams. It wouldn't have mattered how much policing that you had had in Parliament itself. Obviously, that attack on the bridge was the kind of thing that somebody could have done in a car anywhere, not just in London, but anywhere in the country as well. And that's why this has to also be about looking at the wider causes and the radicalisation, as well as the immediate policing response.
Yeah, I think that in some ways is the most frightening aspect of this attack, that this is someone who was armed with a car, effectively, and a couple of knives, and yet was able to wreak such havoc. As someone who's been involved in kind of home affairs for a long time, as a former Shadow Home Secretary, now chairing this committee, do we need to accept that this is looking like the new normal?
Well, this is the kind of thing that the police and security services prepare for all of the time. As they say, this is the sort of thing that they hope will never happen. And it is a real tribute to them that they have foiled many such similar attacks.
Of course.
We've been living with this, obviously, in Britain since 7/7 attacks and so on. I think the challenge for us is about how we respond, how we deal with this, because obviously this is a global challenge, but how we respond and deal with the problems that we are having here in Britain. And you had Nigel Farage on earlier, and I have to say I think the way he is responding actually plays into the hands of extremists, because it was a divisive response that terrorists and extremists want to divide us. I think that kind of response actually makes it worse. To say somehow still today, in answer to your questions, that this was an issue about immigration, when we know this man, Khalid Massoud, or Adrian Elms, whatever he was called, was born in Kent, British, born in Kent. Unless Nigel Farage is talking about putting vetting and border controls around Kent, I don't see what it is that he thinks is the answer by making this an issue about immigration, rather than dealing with the serious causes of what happened in this case and the vile crime and terrorist attack that this man launched.
So if it's not about immigration, do we need to look at some of the communities in the UK? Because it's also quite striking that this man spent time or had links to Birmingham, Luton, East London, 3 areas that have disproportionate number of terrorists and extremism coming out of those areas. Do some Muslim communities need to do more?
There are issues about how you tackle Islamist extremism, and we should be clear this is a perversion of Islam. This is not about Muslim communities across the board, and this is about a perversion of it. And I think, again, responding to your earlier interview, the idea that you would try to make this about all Muslim communities when we've also it's as Brendan
Cox, all Muslim communities, but some Muslim communities. No, and I need to be open and frank about this.
So I do think you need to tackle Islamist extremism, and I think take it very seriously. But, I think Brendan Cox had put it very well when he said you should no more treat this vile attacker as a representative of Islam than you should treat Thomas Mayer, who murdered Joe Cox, as being somehow a representative of Yorkshire. And so we should tackle those causes, and the government does have to look more widely, I think, at the way in which radicalisation is taking place and what is happening, but don't make this about dividing communities when we know that it was many Muslim faith leaders and communities who were among the first to condemn the attack, when we have a fantastic British Muslim mayor who is leading the attack, leading the response to this vile attack from London and doing a fantastic job.
Now, we've heard this morning that the Home Secretary and the government want to do more with tech companies, with companies like Google, Facebook, etc. Your committee has heard from a string of these companies about hate speech on their platforms, and you've seen a succession of people effectively holding their hands up and saying there's nothing we can do about it. Do they have a duty to do more?
I think they absolutely have a duty to do more, and there is much more they could really easily do. I think there are two issues. There's one which is about how some of these tech companies cooperate with the police once a terror attack has happened. I think, and there's questions about the way WhatsApp respond and so on. There's a lot more that should be done there. There's also a question for the mainstream social media companies like Google, Facebook, Twitter, about the way in which they still allow vile and illegal extremist propaganda to be on their platforms. And if you look at YouTube, you can very easily find jihadi propaganda videos, national action propaganda videos, even though those organisations are banned. And yet you can still find their videos on YouTube after a short search. They should be doing things themselves to take those videos down. And frankly, I think it's not going to be enough for the government simply to have more meetings with them. I think we're going to have much more pressure on them to act because, I know that Amber Rudd wants to have another summit with them and another meeting with them. I'm sure that's very good. But David Cameron had lots and lots of meetings with them that kind of went round these issues again and again. I think they have to act. And if they don't, we should look at the kind of law that Germany is now talking about, where you have fines for not removing illegal material and illegal, dangerous terrorist propaganda from these online platforms.
Hearing you speak really highlights how there's not very much Labour can really do about it at the moment because you're not in power and you still feel like you're an awful way, a long way from being in power. Sometimes it feels as though people such as yourselves are taking a bit of a step back at the moment, but surely this is the time to be fighting in the trenches and doing more for your party, isn't it?
Well, obviously I'm chairing a cross-party select committee, so obviously that means some of the work is cross-party, but I think it is also about engaging with exactly the biggest issues that face the country, because whether that is around the kind of extremist or terrorist attack that we're looking at on the select committee, whether it's around the challenges for policing for the 21st century, whether it's around what the future immigration rules should be for Brexit, I certainly think that we are looking at exactly those issues and also doing the work as part of the Labour Party as well, because you're right, I think we need a strong Labour Party now more than ever, given the challenges that we face.